This is Exit Your Matrix. I'm Brad Villers, and welcome to another of my Some Thoughts on Vignettes, where I offer at least what I intend to be some useful information related to my video series on Larkin Rose's book, The Most Dangerous Superstition. Most recently, he had introduced the idea of natural law, and if you saw that one, you probably picked up on my enthusiasm for the topic. The reason is that, through a study of natural law, we can come to an understanding not only that there is a knowable, observable framework for the consequences of human behavior, but also that most of the behaviors and rituals we engage in with the intention of governing those consequences are, in a word, ludicrous. The first stop on this journey of self-deception is a foundational question that will showcase our indoctrination, and it is this: where do our rights come from? Now, any self-respecting American who has managed to stay awake during even the briefest parts of the average social studies or history class can nail that one cold. The Constitution, right? Well, let's take a closer look using excerpts from a 2020 presentation that former Judge Andrew Napolitano gave at the Mises Institute in Auburn, Alabama.
And it's very important to understand the concept of the natural law, to understand reason. It is the key and most significant word. If you accept the argument that all humans can reason, if you accept the argument that there are things that we can't not know, then you accept the argument that our rights come from our humanity. If our rights come from our humanity, they do not come from the government. They are not susceptible to diminution by the government. They can't be taken away by legislation or by executive command. They could only be taken away if we waive our rights by violating someone else's natural rights.
With his comments, and given that we're on the topic, I'll just go ahead and say that it seems abundantly clear to me that the reason we're flogged at every opportunity with the Constitution this and the Constitution that is that it reinforces the notion of our rights being bestowed, or similarly withdrawn, by government, not them being a condition of our humanity. Yet that stepchild document, the one that's hardly ever mentioned, what is it called again? That's right, the Declaration of Independence, states very clearly that we are endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights. Of course, that's the same treatise that tasks us not only with the right but the duty to throw off any government which has exhibited, quote, a long train of abuses and usurpations. And that is precisely the reason we rarely hear about it. Next, we move on to man-made law, and there is no one better suited to chart this portion of our course than that assailer of tyranny, Lysander Spooner. And just have a look at that glorious beard. In his 1882 work, and yes, you need to hear the full title, Natural Law, or the Science of Justice, a treatise on natural law, natural justice, natural rights, natural liberty, and natural society, showing that all legislation whatsoever is an absurdity, a usurpation, and a crime. Wow. He lays the groundwork for the necessity of laws by describing that, throughout history, groups have organized themselves for the purpose of stealing from and enslaving others, leading those controllers to invent weapons and organize themselves into military forces. With the general populace at that time being scattered geographically, lacking similar resources and scratching out what would generously be called a meager existence, quote, the only alternative for them for saving even their lives or the lives of their families was to yield up not only the crops they had gathered and the lands they had cultivated, but themselves and their families also as slaves. Their self-proclaimed owners then entered into agreements they called laws, with the sole aim of ensuring their ability to control their slaves and, quote, the purpose and effect of these laws having been to maintain, in the hands of the robber or slaveholding class, a monopoly of all lands and, as far as possible, of all other means of creating wealth, and thus to keep the great body of laborers in such a state of poverty and dependence as would compel them to sell their labor to their tyrants for the lowest prices at which life could be sustained. He concludes with this: what then is legislation? It is an assumption by one man or body of men of absolute, irresponsible dominion over all other men, whom they call subject to their power. It is the assumption, by one man or body of men, of a right to subject all other men to their will and their service. It is the assumption, by one man or body of men, of a right to abolish outright all the natural rights, all the natural liberty of all other men, to make all other men their slaves, to arbitrarily dictate to all other men what they may and may not do, what they may and may not have, what they may and may not be. It is, in short, the assumption of a right to banish the principle of human rights, the principle of justice itself, from off the earth, and set up their own personal will, pleasure, and interest in its place. All this and nothing less is involved in the very idea that there can be any such thing as human legislation that is obligatory upon those upon whom it is imposed. Hey there, quick interruption. First off, I've been extremely encouraged of late with the number of views and new subscribers, so thank you. And I have this question. Do you feel others could benefit from exposure to the information I'm sharing? If so, subscribing and giving this a thumbs up are definitely ways to help it circulate, but I'd also ask that you think about sharing it. I appreciate the consideration. Now back to the only law, natural law. And I want to conclude by sharing some clips from 2 videos I released in May, which were in turn summaries of an 8+ hour presentation Mark Passio gave titled Natural Law, the Real Law of Attraction and How to Apply It in Your Life. As I mentioned before, I believe Mark's is the most profound and well-researched work I've seen on the topic. And I would suggest thinking about what you'll see next in the context of an entirely different framework of organization and interaction for human beings, as contrasted with the authority, government-centered model most people currently subscribe to. I'll also link these videos in the description, so in less than 30 minutes combined, I think they provide a pretty solid distillation of the material Mark presented. Here we go. So what does living in harmony with natural law mean? First and foremost, it's based in the principle that you have not only the capacity, but the responsibility to acquire knowledge so that you, not a religious or a political or any other source or intermediary or perceived authority, you can then properly judge what is right and wrong. Let's talk now about natural law transgressions. So every harmful action that a human being is capable of taking is a form of theft. Some form of property is always being stolen when a wrongdoing is committed. Life is a form of property. Rights are a form of property. Freedom is a form of property. So really, we could simplify natural law and basically say it as simply as, don't steal. And to repeat, natural law is always in effect and always holds true, regardless of a population's belief systems or prevailing thinking. People and institutions can only claim the ability to bestow or withhold rights when such a thing does not exist in nature. And why? Because our rights as human beings are our literal birthright. They are a gift of creation and they belong to us. And no matter how big the group is or how much in agreement they are, when they attempt to impinge upon any individual's rights through their organization, even if it's in the form of a very official-looking government or has the best stated intentions, it is a violation of natural law, and no, we're not off the hook because we are abdicating our responsibility as conscious human beings when we submit to it. I hope you found this informative. If so, come back and we'll do it again. If not, you watching this has given the platform's algorithm that extra little incentive to get it in front of someone who might. So thanks. As always, be well.